It wasn't stopping. So they came to us and they said, listen, we really need to do an advanced MRI. We got to see what's going on in his brain. But then they ran every test and everything's coming back negative. So they ran the test. They did it. They had to unhook him from the EEG, which is why they don't want to do it, because they have to continually give him seizure medicine. But they're like, listen, we're going to give him the medication. We just can't monitor him as close, but we'll give him the medication. So he goes down to have the advanced MRI, which takes a while. So I go to the chapel and just in the chapel, just praying and praying and praying with Chad. And they bring him back to the room and they hook him back up, and he's in his little bed, you could call it, in the NICU. And you each have your own room. So, nobody else is in there with us. His little isolette. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go have a drink of coffee. Really haven't eaten or done anything in like a week and a half. I wouldn't even get dressed. My hair was a mess, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be there with my child. So I thought, I'm going to go have a sip of coffee. And as I was having a sip of coffee, I saw the neonatologist and our NICU doctor coming down the hallway. So I knew they were coming to talk to us. It was fairly quick after the MRI, and we go into the room. Oh, and you just never forget those. You just never forget it. And they're just like, listen, there's too much damage. The cells are continuing to die. It looks like he had a stroke in utero. So either the cord got wrapped around his neck or he got kinked. Either way, he lost blood flow to the brain. And when it came back, it just charged back into his brain, into all the cells and everything. So initially you would call it a stroke in layman terms. And they believe it probably happened a week before birth. Just a fluke. I mean, nothing anybody could have ever done, ever foreseen. So they just said, we're going to have the palliative care. So palliative care was going to come and then essentially just say, hey, do you want to, unhook him, let him go? You can have him on life support forever, but he has the brain's slowly dying. So there is nothing there. And even if you did leave him on there, one, he would never have a life, but two, he wouldn't last very long, even if he was hooked up. So essentially you have to just make the choice to let him go. So they were amazing though. Palliative care was incredible. And by then I'm always holding him, when they're not monitoring him and allow you to hold him. I always had him, and they're like, he's so comfortable in your arms and he knows you. He's not like, he can still feel you. They can still see, their brain's slowly dying. The brain stem is slowly dying. And he has several damage all over his brain. But he knows who you guys are, and, he knows your voice. And so we made the decision to do that. It was like a Sunday evening, and you let people come in and say goodbye. Now, during this time, it was RSV season, so they only allow a certain number of people in the hospital. You can't do anything about that. They were super kind and would let people. By then, they're like, okay, well, let them have whoever they want. So it's pretty much, you want people to say goodbye, but it's torture, because you have to wait for them to say goodbye, and then it's your turn. And so part of you wants them to just hurry up and get it over with, because you just have to go through what you have to go through. So, but yeah, each one would come in, his grandpa and his grandma and his aunt and uncle. And they'll come in and say goodbye, which I'm sure was torture. And then it was Chad and I, and we did have the birth mom and her grandma. And then I just held him, and the doctor extubated him, which they pull out the breathing tube then. And you just wait. Pretty sure there's nothing worse than just waiting for your child to die. And little Cameron, well, he was a fighter, so he just kept on breathing, kept on going, and the doctor just waited with us By then, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, it's 3 o'clock. He's still just breathing away. He still has a good heartbeat. I mean, good as in 90, which a baby should be 180 or above. Babies have fast heartbeats, and his respirations were still up there. So the doctor's like, okay, well, we don't know how long this ever takes. Granted, they expected him to go as soon as they extubated him, but he didn't. And so he's like, I'll just come back and check on him and you guys can just keep holding him. So we did. And, by then everybody's gone home. People come back because it's the next morning and he's still there, still breathing. So it was pretty incredible. So we just held him. I'm pretty sure I didn't leave this blue chair for 3 days because you're just waiting. So it terrified me not to be there. So I didn't shower. I didn't brush my teeth. Finally my sister-in-law is like, listen, you need to shower. You need to brush your teeth. You have to get up. You need to eat something. And then I made sure like Chad was holding him, but I remember they came, like you hadn't slept, but you don't sleep. It had been 3 weeks since I'd even slept, like you're just a zombie. And I remember, so you didn't sleep that whole night. And then my other, our family came, my family came. And I remember my sister-in-law coming into the room and I remember begging her, one, if I fell asleep, please wake me up. If you think he's going, then you gotta wake me up. And she's like, I will. And so she stayed up through the whole night so I could get some sleep. I mean, I was still holding him, but she would listen to him breathe that whole night. And then he just kept going. And so for 2 days at the hospital, he just kept going. And we knew when he was having seizures. They would still give him seizure medicine. They just didn't monitor him anymore. You didn't need to monitor him. And they're like, listen, everything that we're doing here at the hospital, you guys could do at home. So if you want to bring him home on hospice, we'll get a hold of a hospice place. They'll come visit you. You can bring him home. We're like, oh my goodness, we're actually getting to bring him home. Well, we never thought we would bring him home. We thought he was going to die the instant they pulled the breathing tube. So they worked with us and we still gave him the seizure medicine when he came home. But he did get to come home and he actually lived almost another 2 weeks, which the longest any child has lived in his condition was 3 weeks. He didn't quite make it 3 weeks after he was extubated, but almost. And it was gorgeous here in February. It was beautiful. Like we went outside, we went on walks with him. He got to go outside. He got to meet so many friends and family. He was never put down. We didn't use anything. So we never used a crib or whatever people gave us because I was like, no, if I'm not holding him, someone else is holding him. He will never know what it's like to be put down. And he never did. I slept with him. Oh, so many memories of just in our little blue chair, and he would wake up at 4 a.m. and have a seizure, and I would give him seizure medicine. And then, he got cool. He would talk.
Say hi. Say hi, bud. Say hi. You can do it? Say hi. There you go. Yes, you can.
He would just sit there and look at me with his big brown eyes and just coo, and I can just still feel him on my chest, which you pray that never goes away. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, we knew he was struggling, so we called Riley, and they're like, okay, you can give him his morphine. It's not going to, his breathing's not going to go down. It's just going to help him. Like, we were afraid to give him morphine because we thought it would, stop him from breathing and stuff. But they're like, it'll just make him comfortable. So we gave him morphine, and we just held him, and the hospice doctor came that night and said, I don't foresee it being a lot longer. He was great. We did love him. He was super sweet. And so we didn't really want anybody there. Chad had his brother and sister-in-law came, and they got to come for a little bit. But then, his heart rate slowly went. And it's pretty much hell on earth, really, to hold him because he slowly goes, and that's what you did. And 4 a.m. Wednesday morning, my husband's a paramedic, so obviously he can listen to the heartbeat. You don't need people. And he's like, his heartbeat's gone. There's no heartbeat. So passed away in my arms, and we just called hospice, and they came and did what they needed to do. Thankfully, Chad is related to the people who own the funeral home, so we knew they were already coming. They came. I mean, it's undescribable holding them, but then to have to put them in a little casket to drive away. There's just no words. But we did that, and it's not an adoption story that anybody goes through. This does not happen ever. I just think that it took 5 years because God knew there was a special little boy who needed our love, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I would do it again in a heartbeat. The best thing, totally changes your whole perspective on everything. Oh my gosh, he was the biggest blessing. I would never, ever trade it. Obviously it still hurts 3 years later, but I would take all that pain in a heartbeat to have him for the 28 days we did. Those moments were the best moments. You realize that the 5 years that it took us to get our son, those 5 years, God had a whole other plan than we ever thought. Like, he meant for us to have Cameron at our adoption agency and where we're from, had we adopted from them, had it been quicker. I mean, there's so many other obstacles that could have happened, but he knew there was a special little boy, and I would never trade that. I can now look up to heaven and smile at the memories. You're not always crying. You're reliving the precious moments and the good times you had. Eventually the excruciating pain that you go through, it lessens. And I don't think that time is the answer. I don't think that time ever helps you heal. I think the only thing that helps you heal is the Lord and your faith. I mean, you can have all the time in the world, but if you don't work on it and go and bring it to the Lord every time it starts getting hard or whatever, I think you have other vices and stuff. And if you don't have a faith and have a hope that knowing you're going to see him again one day, without that hope, you're lost. What would there be? The thought that I get to hold him and snuggle him again, that's incredible. And I can't wait for that day.
And that is the one thing I wanted to share your story with, Carrie, is not to freak people out about adoption, and of course we're going through some stressful times right now, is to depress anybody. It was to share Carrie's amazing faith journey, and just kind of, like you were saying, Carrie, there was a reason that this all happened, and there is a happy ending to this story. So if you want to share that faith journey, it was devastation for you, and how you got through it.
And I think that I just knew that whether I could choose a road where I could just be mad at God and think, why would you do this? Why would you do this to us? But in the end, it was, why did you pick us? Like, how fortunate I was to get to know this child. That's not the thought you have every day. It doesn't mean you don't get angry or mad at God. Of course you do. It was excruciating. You shouldn't have to go through this pain. You waited this long for a child. You were already told eons ago you could never have a child. You already went through that. And then for this to happen, yeah, you're going to get angry. But he already knows that. So that's okay. I brought my anger to him. But then you eventually start to realize, out of all of that, anybody could have been picked for that journey. It might not have been us. But the fact that he chose us as parents, he entrusted us knowing that we would do the job we needed to do, and we would love him beyond anything we had ever thought possible. I'm like, thank you. You picked me to be this child's mother, and the blessings that came out of it just would take me all day to tell you the way he showed up. Funeral costs are not cheap. we were out of work for a month, you know? I mean, Chad still got a paycheck because of PTO. And then, but then his coworkers donated their PTO. And just, I mean, one story I remember, we had to go and pick out his headstone, and we had the money for it, and the picture cost an extra $500. And you're thinking, we're just giving you all this money. I mean, it's a child. But, you know, so you do what you do. You put it on credit, whatever. And I came home and there was a check on my counter from my boss for $500. I mean, just little things like that. Like, everything was covered. We never had to worry about anything. The way he showed up was incredible. But he also showed up in ways that I don't think you can actually experience unless you go through this road of peace and love that I have never experienced before. And there's not really a way to put it in words. You would go to the gravesite and you could almost feel like you could just reach out and touch heaven. I mean, like, it describes that kind of peace and joy in the Bible, in those verses in the Bible that talks about that. But you, unless you've been down a road where you literally, all you can do is hold on to Jesus, I don't know if you can ever experience that kind of peace. You know, like the world's in turmoil right now. Things are going on. And if you really sink into his word and him and spend time with him, he's going to give you that peace he promises in the word. And he does. Trust me, he really does do that. For me to have that peace and like a sense of joy and just knowing I got to be a part of this mission that he called us to love this little boy is a privilege. You know, that's not what I would have said at first, because you are devastated, you are sad, but you journey through that with Jesus and you come out on the other side knowing that I couldn't even imagine not being in that center of that will at that time.